Hello, I'm Oliver Ukereghe. It's no Khanzadi, and we are MajorTim.space Young Ambassadors. Today we are interviewing Dallas Campbell. Dallas, could you please introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Dallas Campbell. I'm a science broadcaster, which means that I present television programs and podcasts, and I write books, and I talk about science and society and the history of science and those kinds of topics. So I love talking about science, and so that's what I do. That's what I do for a living.
Could you tell us a little about your academic background and what you originally studied?
Well, yeah, it's a good question actually. I mean, I think when people think, "Oh, a science broadcaster," they automatically assume I must be an academic. I'm not an academic. I was a very poor, low quality academic when I was at school, and I left school, didn't really know what to do, and I ended up studying drama because I wanted to be an actor. I still want to be an actor actually. So that's what I when I left. So I studied drama and English, and then I worked as an actor for a few years in London when I was living in London, and then when I was doing that, I as a kind of hobby, I'd come up with ideas for TV shows for science programs, and eventually I got some of those made and ended up presenting them. So I started off as an actor, not a scientist at all, and then moved into science presenting. And very much at the heart of that I'm a great believer that science isn't just a subject. It's not just the thing that you study at school. Science is the story of everything really about how the world works and what keeps the whole show on the road. And I think that's a story not just for academics but for everyone really. So I noticed that most people who talked about science on TV were academics, and so I thought, well, why don't we do some science programs where you get someone who isn't an academic to find out about stuff? And so that's kind of what I did.
You have an incredibly diverse and successful career across acting, presenting, writing, and documentary filmmaking. So far, what would you consider is your greatest achievement and why?
Well, I think. Oh, that's a good. I think for me, actually, factual television is the thing that makes me most proud. I think partly because when I was your age, I used to grow up watching BBC science programs. I used to watch a program called Tomorrow's World, and there were
Mhm.
people like presenters I used to really like James Burke and Michael Rodd and William Woolard. And the BBC had a lot of science on television. And even though I wasn't a scientist, I used to love those programs. Even programs like Think of a Number with Johnny Ball, and just really into those programs. And so for me, the BBC was very much the kind of gold standard, if you like, of like that was the kind of pinnacle. People like David Attenborough worked on the BBC, and so that's I always thought, wow, that'd be amazing to work for the BBC. And then I think I ended up working for the BBC, and I think I still think it's the gold standard. So that's the thing I'm really sort of proud about. So factual television first, and I've been really lucky. I've done some amazing programs and gone all around the world, and then writing books second. I've written a couple of space history books, and writing books is it's hard work. You have to do a lot of research. You have to be very thorough, and that takes a lot of work. And I think those have been very satisfying as well.
Mhm.
Having presented numerous science programs and shows for both younger and adult audiences, how do you tailor your present how do you tailor your presenting style and overall approach to engage effectively with individual audience?
Um, Kind of, I never really. I mean, you should always think about who your audience is, and I understand that. But to be honest, I don't really change my presenting style whether I'm doing a BBC Four documentary about something quite niche or a very popular BBC One. I just think if something's interesting, it's interesting. Whether you're a kid or you're a grandparent, there's no. I don't know. I'm still into the same things that I was into when I was 10, and I haven't really changed that much. So I never I don't really think about it that much. I just talk about what I think is interesting, and I'm enthusiastic in the same way as if I'm talking to someone your age or if I'm talking to someone a lot older. I'm always just kind of me, really. I think it comes down to being honest. Don't try and sort of talk down to your audience because they're young, or don't try and pretend to be more clever than you are because you're talking to academics. I'm always just the same. I just like to tell it how it is, or how I see it, really. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay. During your career, you have travelled to many fascinating places and experienced some remarkable opportunities. Which of these experiences stands out as the most memorable, and what made that particular experience so significant for you?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's difficult. I've been to some really crazy and interesting places that people don't normally get to go in. I've
Yeah.
explored secret chambers in the pyramids in Egypt. I've dug up mummies in Egypt. I've been to rocket launchers in Kazakhstan and traveled all around China. I've traveled all around America. I've been to some amazing places. I think do I have one that really stands out? I suppose really I did a series maybe about 10 years ago, maybe a bit more than 10 years ago, maybe 12, 13 years ago, called it was called Supersized Earth, and it was for BBC One, and it was a program about how the modern world works. So lots of engineering and that kind of stuff. And I just went to some amazing places. We filmed on top of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, right at the very, very top. And I filmed in the bottom underwater in a Mexican sewer. Uh, and on I nearly killed myself on a suspension bridge in China. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I have one particular place because they've all been so amazing. Maybe, I'll tell you one that was really special was maybe going out for Tim Peake's launch to Baikonur, which is where we launch astronauts to the International Space Station. And actually being there for a launch was pretty special because, it was a big deal. Tim Peake was the first European Space Agency astronaut going up there. And so there was a lot of publicity around it. So I think maybe that was my favorite place to film. But then I'll think of something else in 5 minutes and I'll let you know. But yeah, I've been to some great places.
Reflecting on your time presenting Bang Goes the Theory, which episode or experiment stands out to you as the most memorable or rewarding to film, and why?
Again, Bang, we did lots of great films. Spent a lot of time in America actually filming for Bang, doing a lot of technology and a lot of science happens in America. So we'd go over to some of the big American universities, places like Caltech and Stanford and places like that. There was one that sticks in my mind. There's a very famous experiment that after which set out to prove, not really prove, but to demonstrate Einstein's theory of relativity. And what they did is we have very, very accurate clocks called atomic clocks, and they're accurate to within a billionth of a second, and all time on Earth is measured against these clocks. And back in the 1970s, two scientists synchronized two clocks, so they were exactly synchronized, and they took one on an aeroplane and they flew it all the way around the world. And when they came back, that clock was slightly out of sync. And the reason it was out of sync was because Einstein's general theory of relativity, and special theory of relativity. So because the aeroplane was further away from the center of the Earth, and because it was traveling at speed, time was relative depending on where the clock was, and that's quite counterintuitive. Anyway, it was an experiment that hasn't been done since the 1970s, but we did that again. So I flew on an airplane all the way around the world with a clock, just to prove that Einstein was correct, and that was a pretty fun film. We ended up we had an hour
Yeah.
in Auckland and New Zealand, and we stopped off in Hong Kong and Los Angeles, and we did a big that was pretty fun. That was pretty fun. So actually, some of the aviation filming I've done has been really good. Yeah, that was a fun. It was a good series to make because we did difficult science, or not difficult science, but interesting science that normally you wouldn't do at 7:30 on BBC One. After the One show. It was a family science show, but we weren't afraid to tackle interesting. We went to the Large Hadron Collider and did a film there. So we went all over the place.
In your opinion, what are the best ways to inspire young people, particularly girls who may have a stereotypical view of science due to the subject in schools often appearing to be solely confusing terminology or memorization of formulas?
Well, that's it. I mean, I just it's a bit like saying, "Oh, I love music," but only ever looking at music on sheet music printed out. You can if you want to be a musician, I understand that you need to understand music theory,
Yeah.
but you and I are allowed to listen to music and enjoy it without someone going, "Oh, you're listening to music, you must understand minims and crotchets and semiquavers and blah blah blah." No, uh, science is just a thing that humans do, and it's interesting. It's a way of exploring the world. So I think we need to frame science better, in the same way that we like listening to music without thinking about it as a subject at school. We just like listening to music. Why is it any different for science? I don't know. We need to just talk. And also we need to not talk at people. I've noticed a lot of science communicators. We're like, you must enjoy science, whoa, science, and very often you get talked at. And actually, I think just being interested in the world is enough. You being interested in the world and doing whatever it is that you guys like to do, writing about it, or making films or podcasts, whatever it is you like to do, or just talking to your friends about it, about something interesting that's in the news that is about science or technology. You don't need to ram it down people's throats. You don't need to be worthy about it and say you must like science. Just I like talking about it just because I enjoy it, really, and that's it. I don't make a big deal of it, and I enjoy making TV shows and I enjoy making podcasts. So
Having explored subjects ranging from space and engineering to physics and history throughout your career, are there are there any areas of science that you still feel particularly eager to delve further into and understand more deeply?
yeah, well, for me, because I'm not a scientist, I don't do science, but I write about science and I write about scientists. So for me, you're right. It's very for me. It's the history of science really, and how science works as an outsider is what I like to do. So I think for me, what I'm interested is a little bit what Noah was talking about. This idea of science and society, how science fits into normal everyday life, thinking about science not as something just a special thing that only scientists do, but something that's just woven into the fabric of life in the same way that any other cultural thing is. So I like making programs like that. Like the last book I've written is a book of biographies about people who worked in space exploration, but it's really looking at the story of what it was that inspired them. What were they reading at the time? What were so what were they thinking about? Why were they interested in rockets or space exploration? So I'm interested in people. I'm interested in the philosophy of science, the history of science, the reasons why we do science, why there's still controversy in science. I'm interested in things like conspiracy theories, like why people
Yeah.
don't believe in things like
Mhm.
going to the moon or why the earth is flat, or I'm interested in why there is mistrust in science. So I'm interested in it from a social science point of view as well.
Mhm. Your books make complex scientific ideas accessible to a wide audience without losing their depth or informative accuracy. When writing about subjects such as space, technology, and exploration, how do you balance scientific detail with engaging storytelling for readers of different ages?
That's a great question. Well, a couple of things there. First of all, I think even if it's a complex thing like particle physics or rocket science, at its heart is a very simple idea. And I never try and be complicated. I think audiences love simple explanations to things. And actually, my job is to make things simple and understandable. I have no desire in making things complicated. And actually, I've never come across an area of science that I haven't been able to explain really in a couple of sentences. Really, it's really simple, really. Rocket science might be complicated, but the reasons why we build rockets isn't complicated. We human beings love to explore. So simplicity is a really important thing. And I think the best science communicators, whether they're journalists or writers or TV presenters, whatever it is, can just make people feel at home by being simple and plain speaking. I think it's when people try and be clever or try and be show how clever they are, then that's not good science presenting. So I always make things really simple. I speak in plain, clear language. Um, but also I understand, because I've been working in it a long time, I understand how story structure works. I understand how to tell a story in a simple way. And there's no difference really between drama, whatever drama you like to watch on Netflix or what TV, whatever you like, and talking about factual science presenting. There's beginnings, there's middles and ends. Act one, act two, act three. Uh, what are we trying to find? Here's how we try to find it, and this is what we learn. That's it. Beginnings, middles, and ends. So whenever I'm tackling a story, I think, okay, what's my act one? What's my first third? And then I think, okay, well, what's the middle bit? What are we talking about in that middle bit?
Yeah.
And then at the end, I'm like, well, okay, what's the ending all about? Act one, act two, act three. It's all you need. It's really simple. Um, I'm interested in story structure, and because I've worked in drama as well, I like to break it down. And I studied English, so I broke down, things like Shakespeare and Chekhov and all the dramatists that I studied when I was younger. There's no difference between what I do and studying drama. I think it's just telling a story, and all stories really are the search for a solution to something. Like something happens, and we want to find out what it is. If you pick any story, whether it's Breaking Bad or Hamlet or Macbeth or Where's Spot, it's all the same. Stories always follow very similar patterns.
Since you began presenting science programs, how have you seen audiences' engagement with science content evolve? And have you noticed a shift in the public perceptions of science with the rise of
Yeah,
modern technology?
definitely. Well, I mean, certainly things have changed. When I started, there was no social media really, and so or it was just starting. So there was no TikTok videos or YouTube videos. Science was on telly, or it was in books, and of course that's completely changed now. Now some of the best science content's online. Um, so that's definitely changed. But at its heart, it's still the same. At the heart, it's like audiences love understanding how things work and why things are the way they are. And it's why David Attenborough is so popular still. He's 100 years old. He's been going forever. And we love to understand how the natural world works. We love to be taken to exotic locations to see how things work in other parts of the world, whether it's animals or engineering. So I think the media, TV, the internet provides a really important service. And again, I'll say it again, we're not doing science, we're not doing research, we're showcasing other people's research, and we're doing it using the language of storytelling, as Noah pointed out. And that's what makes it interesting for people. So I think the audiences are the same uh, as they were 100 years ago. It's funny, I've got lots of science magazines from the 1920s, and they talk about exactly the same things we talk about now. It's all quite exciting, and they think about the future and what the future's going to be like. Um, I'm actually, what I like writing about. I like writing about the histories of history, old histories of people, what people thought the future was going to be like. I think that's really interesting.
I hope to pursue a career in paleontology and space science in the
Mm.
future and communicate research through public speaking to a variety of audiences, encompassing academics, the general public, and young people. Ballerina Rudolph Review famously stated, in a sense, we are paid for our fare. What advice would you give to young people or adults who desire to develop strong public speaking skills but are perhaps held back by intense nerves or fear of negative judgment?
Well, we all are. It's a good quotation. That I know that quotation. I suppose the difference between a professional and an amateur in this world, if you like, and I don't mean the word amateur in a pejorative sense, but professionals turn up and they do it, even if they don't want to, even if they're terrified, even if they've had a terrible day, even if their life has fallen apart, whatever's going on in your life, a professional turns up and does it. It's not just public speaking or media. If you're a sports person or a musician or whatever it is, if you've got to perform in some way, you're a footballer, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. You've got to turn up and you've got to do it. And that's the difference. You don't have a choice. And I think that's what Nureyev was saying. Is like, look, I'm paid to go on stage and dance. That's what I do. I'm a ballet dancer. And he suffered from terrible stage fright. So you have to decide. It's like, no, you don't have to do it. But if you want to be a professional and people are paying money for you to do this, then you do have to do it. It doesn't matter. I've had days where terrible things have happened during the day. Oh dear. But you've got to turn up and you've got to leave it all behind. And that's a skill in itself. I think the other thing as well is, these sorts of skills, learning to present, learning to be a better public speaker or a writer, they're sometimes called soft skills. And I think that's a bit of a pejorative term. I think it sounds like it's a bit of an easy option term, but I think your success in life, especially with AI, because a lot of jobs and a lot of things that people were going to do are going to change because of AI, but no one can take you away from you. And actually learning to speak well, learning to structure a sentence, learning to write, learning to present, learning to do all those sorts of things is a really, really useful skill to have and worth doing. Nerves, who cares about nerves? Like, say you're nervous, it's not like you're gonna die. It's just nerves. You just put your shoulders back, stand up straight, take a deep breath and get on with it, and then your nerves will go away. Very often, sometimes if I get nervous, it's not like it's anything too difficult. Nerves. It's if you're nervous, it means whatever it is that you're doing is worth doing. It means you're excited about it. So I just think nerves are just part of being excited about whatever it is that I'm doing. Sometimes it feels not very comfortable, but I tell myself I might just shut up. Lucky you for getting to be on stage and talking to some amazing people. That's what I think.
What advice would you give to anyone, particularly young people aspiring to build a career in presenting or public speaking?
My advice would be, oh, sorry, I cut you off, Oliver.
Particularly in fields such as science communication and broadcasting?
My advice would be to just get on and do it. Don't wait for someone to give you a job or an opportunity. You've got to create your own luck. There's an old saying, just don't wait for your ship to come in, swim out and meet it. But I think there's an even better saying, which is don't swim out to your ship and meet it, build your own ship. No one's going to hand things to you on a plate in life. And actually, if you're really interested in science communication or whatever it is, or filmmaking or being an actor or whatever it is that you're interested in life, music, playing football, just go do it. And just by doing it, you'll get better at it, and then opportunities will come along. But sitting around waiting for opportunities and not doing it, there won't be any opportunities. So you have to create your own luck. That's what I did. No one came knocking on my door saying, "Oh, do you want to be a TV presenter?" No, I wrote a TV show and I spent about 10 years trying to get it off the ground, and I got rejected constantly, and then eventually I got a couple of lucky breaks, and that was it. So if you've got an idea, just go make it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this incredible interview. It's been an honor to speak with you.
Well, it's been an honor to speak to you guys. You guys are really smart, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And I love talking to people who are interested, and I wish you well. You've got to find your joy. Find your joy in life. Very often people miss it because they're not looking. And there's an old saying, the poet must never avert his eyes. Keep your eyes open, read books, and enjoy life, and always have a smile on your face. That's my that's my secret.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.